when I found out that I was pregnant, I was excited. And then I found out I was pregnant with twins, and I about passed out in the OB's office. And I just remember my doctor saying, "It's okay, Amber, I just had twins like a couple of months ago. We're gonna get through this." So then that whole wash of calmness that I had worked really hard on was just totally disassembled, and I was back to being very panicked and worried that these boys weren't potentially going to be okay or even survive. They were able to stop labor for the moment being, because at that point I was only 33 weeks, and so they were still trying to make them, you know, give their lungs time to develop and everything. And they're like, "Well, you're gonna stay here probably until you deliver the kids." So instead of being on home bed rest, I was gonna be on hospital bed rest. I made it through the night, and then I made it a couple more days, but then right at 34 weeks, the boys decided they were gonna make their grand entrance. So once the boys were actually delivered, which was quite the experience, they were taken to the NICU, and everyone, all their Pew scores were really great. They were really amazed at how well they were doing, especially since they were only 34 weeks. Sebastian did have to be on a nasal cannula for oxygen when he first came out, and then they were in 2 separate rooms, and so that was kind of hard because I had to go back and forth like to see them. Grant could be held right away, but Sebastian, because he was hooked up, we couldn't really hold him, so kind of had to like go by the incubator and just talk to him and that kind of thing. And then on day 6 of their lives, I got a really panicked phone call from a NICU doctor, and he said that Grant was sick and that I needed to get there quickly. I remember just like bursting into tears because he was just laying there. There was no movement. The doctor was trying to tell me, you know, what was going on, and I'm just like sitting there looking at my baby. I see that my child is not the child I left the night before. His limbs are very limp. There's no response. And so that was absolutely devastating. And I just remember crying and just feeling sick to my stomach. Those waves of anxiety that had kind of went away when the boys were born just came like right back at tenfold. And it seemed the hospital that we were at also was overwhelmed with what was happening, because they said that we needed to transfer to Cardinal Glennon Hospital because they couldn't service the babies anymore. So hearing that was absolutely devastating and just sent me into kind of a tailspin of not only what are we going to do, but like, are my babies going to even survive? Which at 6 days postpartum, you know, you're already dealing with a lot just internally and mentally yourself, and then add that on, it's just completely overwhelming. We met with the nephrologist, and he's like, "Well, traditionally we would do dialysis, but the boys they have to be at least 6 or 10 pounds, and they were only a little over 4 pounds. So he's like, that's not an option because they wouldn't live through it. There's an 80% chance that they'll survive and a 20% chance that they won't." I just remember signing a ton of paperwork that basically said, like, I understand like the risks that, you know, of anything that they do at that point, like even putting in lines and that sort of thing because of the infection risk. The gentleman that we ran into in the hallway was actually the geneticist, and he was interviewing another geneticist, and that geneticist had told Dr. Braddock that he had heard about this treatment that could possibly work, but it never had been done on babies that were so small, but it was an option. At that point, it was kind of the only viable option, and that was to actually put the boys on ECMO, even though their lungs and heart were working, but to put them on ECMO, and then they would be able to run the dialysis through the ECMO, and that might work. So ultimately, ECMO and dialysis it was successful. It worked. They were able to get their ammonia levels down, and by the time that they came off of ECMO and dialysis, they had a definitive diagnosis. So they were actually diagnosed with a rare genetic condition called propionic acidemia. It means that you're missing an enzyme in your liver that breaks down protein. Because they're identical, that's why they both have it. If they had been fraternal, there's a good chance one of them would and one of them wouldn't. But they were diagnosed with that metabolic condition as a lifelong condition. So it wasn't something that was going to be a NICU stay and then, we never have to see the hospital again. I had heard of March of Dimes before. I wasn't really familiar with them. I knew that they did things to help babies, seen their commercials, that sort of thing. It was really more afterwards that I found out about, their lobbying for newborn screen, which is helped to diagnose the boys. So the newborn screen definitely played a huge role, not only in my boys' diagnosis, but in so many other families' diagnosis as well. So I think it's just a great tool that not only helps families, but it really helps to guide the doctors. I have seen firsthand the big role that March of Dimes has had in advocating for the newborn screen, and our family personally has been helped by that. And if March of Dimes hadn't been such a big advocate for that, I don't really like to think about what the outcome might have been for my boys. The boys have been really healthy. We had actually went on our Make-A-Wish trip in September of 2023. Things seemed to be going really well. And on November 13th, Sebastian wasn't feeling that great. He really couldn't keep anything down, so we went in for a routine admittance to the hospital, and I figured by the morning he would start to feel better, and our normal routine of hospital stays would just happen. But unfortunately, I woke up about 3:30 on November 14th. He had passed away. He passed away really unexpectedly. He has brought a lot of light and brightness and memories to all that loved him. We're very thankful that we got 10 years with him and got to have his love surrounded by all of us and all of his stories. So Grant was looking around for brother, and so we explained, that brother went to heaven, and we explained it the best we could. I really feel like a huge piece of Sebastian's soul went into Grant when he passed away, because he's made so many gains, and a lot of the pieces, which weren't really things Grant did a lot of, and Sebastian did more of, Grant started to do a lot of. So Sebastian's still with us, just in a different way. And he'll be going into middle school. So he's got a lot of things that are going to be big milestones that, we didn't know if either of the boys would make it to because, of their diagnosis. But he's come so far and just really is a bright light. Supporting March of Dimes not only affects the children, but it also affects so many other people by raising funds to support all of the wonderful causes that they feel so strongly about that can help families to grow and to be healthy, and for kids to live their best lives, just like Grant and Sebastian. And I think that's really what it all comes down to, is March of Dimes wants to make sure that moms get to see their babies grow up and become the best versions of themselves, and that the kids get to live and love and not be defined by their diagnosis, and to be able to live happy lives.